Welcome everybody, I am Trern. In this video we'll be going over basic Brewmaster monk tanking in World of Warcraft. I expect you to have a general understanding of your class abilities and talents, as we won't be going over those in detail. We will be going over your main defensive abilities and when or how to use them properly. This video is for beginners that want to get into some Mythic Plus dungeons or light raiding. These are my opinions, formed from things that I've seen and experienced doing Mythic Plus dungeons myself. Please let me know in the comments how wrong I am. First, let's talk about Stagger. Stagger is your main form of damage mitigation, and great news, it's passive. It seems fairly complex, but it's actually quite simple except for all the complicated Blizzard math behind it. For simplicity, let's say you get hit for 100 damage. And let's say based on your agility, you stagger 40% of that damage. You now take that 40 damage over the next 10 seconds instead of up front. As long as your stagger amount isn't above your max health, you'll continue to stagger damage that way. Stagger is important because most of your other abilities involve stagger in one way or another, which we'll get into. Another important passive ability to consider is Shuffle. This increases the amount of damage you can stagger from a blow by 100%. Your main damaging abilities cause this, so you shouldn't have any problems keeping it up as long as you're not standing there idle. Just maintain some form of DPS rotation. Next, let's talk about Brews. These are your main abilities that you're going to be using that interact with stagger or each other. These have a range of cooldowns, but you'll be using them as often as possible. Let's start with Purifying Brew. This is your most important ability. This will take that 40 damage from earlier that you staggered and reduce it by half. So now you're only taking 20 of the 40 damage. That's 20% damage reduction from the original 100. This is basically going to be used on cooldown to maintain a low staggered amount. You may want to hold it for a little bit if you have low stagger and you know you're about to take a lot of damage from a certain boss mechanic that hits hard, but no more than a few seconds, and only if you have low stagger. Celestial Brew. This ability creates an absorb shield. You want to be using this on cooldown and after you've used Purifying Brew. Purifying Brew buffs it by up to 200%. This will help with more incoming damage and also will absorb your stagger damage. They work very well together. Fortifying Brew. This is your major long cooldown. Use this before you take damage and not after your screen flashes red. I see so many people reaching for this as an oh crap button instead of using it ahead of time. So don't let your screen flash red, and instead use it when you know you're going to take more damage than usual. A boss mechanic that you know is going to hurt particularly hard, or a large pull, or even an accidental pull. Those would be great times to use this. Before we move on, I want to mention that two of your damaging abilities, Keg Smash and Tiger Palm, are going to reduce the cooldown on your brews. The actual cooldown timers on these is going to be much shorter than it actually shows. It doesn't actually change the way you use them, but you'll get to use them more often, and it's important to know. Next, let's get into your other abilities that are broken down into two categories, proactive and reactive. Let's start on the proactive side. Invoke Dave, the Black Ox. This is mostly a small damage cooldown, but it does share some of your stagger damage. I'd recommend using this on a large pull to do a little extra damage and take a little less. This reacts to your Purifying Brew to do more damage, so keep that in mind. Zen Meditation. This is a big damage reduction cooldown, 60%, but it's a bit different than most tank cooldowns. Getting hit by a melee attack ends it. So you can use it for a single large melee ability, or you can use it for all magic attacks. Or if you're off tanking in a raid, you can use it when you're sharing damage with the main tank but not taking direct damage. It has some really fun uses and you can get pretty creative with it. It's almost completely useless if you're getting pummeled by a large group doing melee damage, so don't use it then. Breath of Fire. This by itself is just part of your damage and threat rotation. However, it interacts with your main offensive ability, Keg Smash. When you Keg Smash first and then Breath of Fire enemies, they do 5% less damage to you. So make sure you're always using it on enemies affected by your Keg Smash. And that's it. Let's jump over to the other side of the screen under Reactive. Spearhand Strike. This is your interrupt. Obviously, you're going to react to spell casting with this. I find it useful to set up an interrupt rotation for dungeons, and as the tank, you're usually going to be going first because you're the first one in. But if you don't set one up, just make sure you're interrupting spellcasts. You really can't do it too often. Leg Sweep. This is a big AoE stun. This is useful for interrupting things that can't be interrupted with Spearhand Strike. I find a lot of channeled spells or melee abilities with a cast can be stopped with it. Also, you can stop multiple casters at once if they're grouped up. And you can also use it to stop from being hit for 3 seconds, or if you need to kite mobs. Expel Harm. This is a healing ability that you want to use on cooldown basically, but only if you've lost some health. It's a very short cooldown, so get used to hitting it often. The most important part of all of this is making sure that you manage your stagger and purify it as much as possible. Use your other abilities to fill in or when you know you're going to be taking more damage than usual. And use your healing ability often. Knowing the dungeon or raid really well is also very important. Practice does make perfect. Also, let your group know or your raid know that you are new to tanking or new to the dungeon or raid so that they may help you out. They're either going to be supportive or they might kick you from the group, but you don't really want to play with those types of people anyways. One last thing, never ever turn your back to a boss or a group of enemies. It leaves you exposed, unable to dodge or parry. Please don't do it. That wraps up this video on monk tanking basics. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you know when future videos are released. Also catch me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/jtrern, where we can hang out, answer questions, and do some dungeons. That's it for now. Until next time.